Story 1. Well, I can't say much on human history due to how broad it is, so I can pinpoint some points in history. In the world of medicine, it's going to be the awarding of the Nobel Prize to Antonio Agos Moniz, the proponent of lobotomy. Also, Andrew Wakefield, the guy who proposed that vaccines cause autism. He created fraudulent results and single-handedly put everyone in jeopardy. Story 2. Bailing out the failed banking system and condemning an entire generation to austerity could be considered a scandal. One could argue that the events leading up to the bank failure were a scandal as well. However, when it emerged that they were not subject to the same rules as the rest of the businesses, it was indeed a scandal. Story 3. Lead in fuel has been a concern for many people. While some know why it was partly banned, not enough are aware that the dangers and health problems associated with it were known from the start. It remains one of the biggest scandals in terms of loss of human life, with estimates of hundreds of thousands of deaths per year continuing to this day. Story 4. Holocaust. The idea of making human-killing factories is so surreal my brain tries to protect me, and I am not realizing what was really going on when thinking about it. So, instead of killing people in war or shooting them, they made slaughter machines. Whole camps to kill people as fast as possible. What was that? Story 5. The lack of free, independent media. They are the watchdog over politicians and corporations. They have failed us, and now they are run by corporations and intelligence agencies. Story 6. May not be the biggest scandal, but the renowned General Amherst of the Indian Wars during the time of Manifest Destiny, when whites overran native lands, used to distribute blankets knowingly infected with smallpox because it would decimate the indigenous population. In other words, biological warfare. Story 7. Maybe the Opium Wars, 1839 to 1860. The British Empire deliberately flooding China with opium, leading to mass addiction and weakening the Qing dynasty, all to maintain economic and colonial dominance, or the colonial and slave trade atrocities. The transatlantic slave trade and European colonial exploitation of Africa, Asia, and the Americas shaped global inequality and caused suffering on an unimaginable scale. The Holocaust, or the generalized oppression of women and children, and also men who are poor, on every continent in every century. Or the concept of war just in general. So many to choose from. Story 8. Our debt-based monetary system is the biggest scam in the history of mankind with the biggest implications. We would all be living much more prosperous and safer lives. The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or be so dependent upon its favors that there will be no opposition from that class. On the other hand, the great body of people, mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantage that capital derives from the system, will bear its burdens without complaint, and perhaps without even suspecting that the system is contrary to their interests. The Rothschild brothers of London writing to associates in New York, 1863. Story 9. Oil companies have data from as early as the 1970s showing that their emissions were the primary driver of global climate change, and they covered up that data for decades. They knew they were damaging the environment and didn't care because of profits. Story 10. While I am not a vegetarian, I am tempted to say the meat industry and man's treatment of animals in general. I believe in the future we may find to a greater degree that animals share a similar consciousness with humans, or we probably already know this but choose to live in convenient denial. Story 11. The pharmaceutical giant Bayer sold a drug for hemophiliacs that ended up being contaminated with human immunodeficiency virus. Once learning of the contamination, instead of ceasing sales entirely, the company chose to discontinue the drug only in the United States, where the evidence of the contamination and associated deaths had come from, and proceeded to market the product in Asia and Latin America. Many patients contracted human immunodeficiency virus and ultimately died of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome because of this decision. To my knowledge, no one from Bayer has ever been prosecuted. Story 12. The affair of the diamond necklace was an incident in 1785 at the court of King Louis XVI of France involving his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette. The reputation of the queen, already tarnished by gossip, was ruined by the implication that she participated in a crime to defraud the crown jewelers of the cost of a very expensive diamond necklace. Story 13. I'd say the crucifixion might be in the top 10. The man did not get a fair trial, the punishment did not fit the crime, and capital punishment offers zero chance of redemption. Terms and conditions apply. Story 14. How the greatest democracy on earth gave up on intelligence for glamour and things. How Americans not only closed their minds, they began to barricade the door. America doesn't even know itself now. You stopped reading, you stopped writing, you stopped doing things, and allowed yourselves to be lulled into a stupor by dopamine and greedy self-interest. You embraced cowardice and cloaked yourselves in fear. Your only hope now is to dive deep into knowledge, go to libraries, and learn your damn history. Story 15. It's got to be Virgin Mary, getting railed behind her husband's back and starting a multi-millennia-long all-encompassing cabal of pedophilia and extortion rather than come clean about it. Story 16. Probably the idea that a man owns a woman and controls her right to reproduction has existed in one form or another in all societies, and in some countries it still exists today, such as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. I have always been impressed with recent female leaders, and I wonder if a matriarchal society would have been more peaceful and prosperous. Story 17. We are getting riled up with divisive topics that are really there to distract us while we get robbed blind due to a collaborative effort by corporations and the government. Story 18. The biggest scandal, and the oldest, is that no one on God's green earth has yet worked out how to stop the 5% or so of the human race from preying parasitically on the rest of us. As a result, we all need locks on our houses, businesses, cars, you name it, and passwords on our devices. We have parasites from pickpockets to dictators, from cybercriminals to Ponzi scheme promoters. We arrest some, we jail others, and nothing stops them. They are the scourge of our species, just as COVID-19 was and whooping cough still is. The wide-ranging harm they cause is immeasurable. In the name of whatever supernatural entity you believe in, can someone please come up with a truly effective deterrent, because I can't. Story 19. Taxes on money we work for, then buy items and groceries and pay more taxes. Buy a house, pay taxes. Tax, 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 while politicians like Trudeau and many others fly all over talking nonsense and getting richer. Story 20. People did not know at the time about the deaths of millions in the Great Leap Forward nor the Gulag system of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. When the world learned about those tragedies, it was quite scandalous. Story 21. Distribution of wealth. There are plenty of resources for every person on this planet, and then some. Nobody should have to live in poverty, and it shouldn't cost to live in the first place. Story 22. The food pyramid? 14 days to stop the spread? COVID vaccine being 100% effective? War on terror was actually about terror and nothing to do with oil? Sitting president having dementia and being covered up by his party? Haven't even gone back 25 years, it's really difficult to think of all of human history. Story 23. Big oil companies created the term carbon footprint to make individual people feel worse about their own pollution, rather than pay attention to how much fracking was destroying our Earth. I did an entire project on it in high school, and I will forever feel deceived. Story 24. That the Son of God rose from the dead, and that the world follows inconsistent books written by people over long periods of time that have driven so much hate, evil, murder, and destruction in the name of a God. Story 25. People of a certain ethnicity or religion claiming that a piece of land is theirs, pushing the local natives out, and managing to convince everyone it is okay. Story 26. Government. An excuse to have overly rich people stimulate their own bank accounts at the expense of the taxpayer by buying out politicians meant to represent us. Story 27. That a select few government officials are truly looking out for the greater good of millions of people. They are an elite group who only seek to serve their purpose and the massive corporations pushing their own agendas. Putting so much blind faith into another human with their own flaws is outrageous to me. I am not a real political person, and I don't even vote, as I realize it's always the same circus with different clowns every so often. Story 28. When the World War started at a time when the woman with bandanas was saying, "We can do it," or "You can do it," it was supposed to be a short stint until the men came back from war. However, the government realized it was an untapped opportunity for income tax they were missing out on. So, they pushed the feminist movement about independence, encouraging women to join the workforce and contribute more tax dollars to the government. Story 29. Like seriously, we are all constantly spied upon in so many ways that it is completely unavoidable and nobody cares. It was the death of privacy being revealed, and we just went, oh, he should be arrested for exposing a state secret. And now, with a fascist administration, we are about to live in an Orwellian nightmare thanks to this. Story 30. Paper gold. Most countries keep their savings in gold. The only surprising thing is that for every 1 ounce of real physical gold, there are about 120 ounces of paper gold not actually backed by metal. This shift began with the removal of the dollar from the gold parity in the 1970s and continued with the removal of gold from the gold parity itself. It works until the market decides to verify it. This has happened recently, but let's keep it quiet. Story 31. I'd say the religion of money and the perpetuation of capitalism are ruining billions of people's lives and destroying the planet. The biggest scandal in human history is that we cannot collectively come up with a better solution because we are born and bred to believe this is the only way. Story 32. I will just do a recent one. 2000 United States election. How is September 11th handled? Does the United States banking system still fail in 2008? Does America have healthcare and other basic freedoms that other developed Western countries do? Lastly, you may not get an Obama presidency, but does America also avoid 8 years of Trump and all the damage he is doing? The best thing to ever happen to George Bush was Donald Trump. People forget how inept he was, and now he is the cute grandpa who made some mistakes but was at least a decent guy compared to the insane uncle we have now. Story 33. Paternity fraud is as old as time, and due to political reasons, it is still not outlawed. In many countries, paternity fraud is protected by the government. In India, even if you hold a DNA report in hand showing you are not the father, it is still not admissible in court. If you lived even for a day with the woman, you are considered the child's father. Story 34. Bernie Madoff's massive Ponzi scheme bilked over $60 billion from investors from the 1960s to the early 2000s. There is a show on Netflix titled Madoff, Monster of Wall Street. Story 35. The responses in this thread are mostly people giving examples of scandals that are not even the biggest in recent memory. Some of them are not even scandals and are just dubious claims. History is a long time. In just the last 100 years, we have had events like the Great Leap Forward, the Holodomor, and the Bengal famine. Any one of those makes most of the scandals listed look like a mild hiccup in comparison. Story 36. Similar to the plastics post, we all need a car to get everywhere. Now, it's kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy since the majority of cities don't have outstanding public transport. There are too many roads in the way now to retrofit outstanding public transport. Story 37. Corporations. Not that long ago, they used to exist just for the public good, such as building a bridge, and were not for profit. Now they rule the world. See also the corporation documentary on YouTube. Story 38. I don't have the biggest, but I have the one that makes me laugh. In ancient Rome, Julius Caesar, as the head of Rome, had an enemy in the Senator Cato. During a meeting when Cato was denouncing Caesar for being treasonous and many other things, a messenger came in and slipped Caesar a note, which Caesar read, supposedly smiling. Cato, thinking he had a gotcha moment, yelled something along the lines of, "See, he is so bold as to plot and conspire against us here in the Senate House. Read your letter aloud." It was a raunchy love letter from Cato's sister, with whom Caesar was having an affair. It was read aloud in front of hundreds of the most powerful men in the entire republic. Story 39. I'm torn between the fact that huge businesses run by very wealthy people are given taxpayers' money, meaning the taxpayer takes on all the risk while the elite take all the reward. That isn't capitalism, that's just socialism for millionaires and billionaires. At a time when socialism is a dirty word, mainly due to the propaganda pushed by those same beneficiaries of socialism, and middle earners fall for it. The other issue is asbestos removal and disposal. You have to pay a huge amount to have asbestos safely removed and disposed of, and it's safely removed and disposed of in the exact same landfill as general household waste, the only difference being it's taken there in a different truck. Story 40. The bomb threats continued for a week. Students discovered that the first threat would allow them to leave school early, even though it was legitimate. The administration threatened to add the days we missed to the end of the school year if it occurred again after the fifth threat. It didn't occur again. Story 41. If by biggest you mean affected the most people, then that is hands down the structure that took over the world in the middle of the 20th century. This structure is composed of the central banks and the military-industrial complex. This structure has been directing the course of events since and until this day. Its purpose is to funnel public funds into private hands. In short, to make a certain group incredibly wealthy and to impoverish the rest of the world. This is achieved by the creation of never-ending wars and crises. One hand creates the money, the other spends the money, and it cycles back through channels into the coffers of the elite class. The major beneficiaries of this system are behind the scenes and also in public view. The revolving door between politics and the most powerful companies means they are deeply integrated and also shielded from scrutiny, literally above the laws of the lands in which they reside. Events such as the Great Financial Crisis of 2008 and 2009, the Iraq invasions, September 11th attacks, Afghanistan wars, and the Vietnam War are all attributed to them.